Hey guys, it's Jordan, and today you guys have requested it, and I'm here showing you how to make disco house like Motor City Drum Ensemble. As usual, you can get the full project file, samples, MIDI, presets, everything from this video right at the top of the description on my website, and if you're a patron on my Patreon, check there because it's already available, and let's dive in. Alright, so the first step, we're going to light this candle here. You're going to want to get like some good lighting in your room, maybe a little bit of neon lighting, a candle. And we can begin. So, the first sound that we have up here is going to be this drum rack, which sounds like this. So this is actually just like a little bit of a background layer for the drums. I'll play you like the whole drum section. You can kind of hear where this fits in. So this is in there just kind of adding a little bit more detail, a little bit more flavor to the drums, right? Because like, obviously this loop without it is still pretty solid. But it just doesn't have like that extra little kind of life woven in there. And the thing about this music is it needs to sound very lively, and it needs to feel almost like it's being played live, right? Because there's like a lot of samples, a lot of live sounds being used. So having like just some type of little fill in here kind of underneath like all these main drums is gonna make that feel a lot more live. And also it's just like a subtle thing that adds a lot of groove. Like obviously, I guess you could go and get like a whole percussion loop and drop it in or something, but it's a very subtle thing. We're really just playing with like adding that 1/16 note there, and then the fact that these are like a lot more open and high sounding than the other hi-hats. So it kind of makes that like a little bit more sparkly just for those two counts. It's a lot going on there, but with just very few notes and very simple stuff. So, from the sounds here, it's two sampled sounds. It's just the snare. And then this vinyl hi-hat. You're going to be using a lot of different vinyl sampled drums throughout this, because you can see the next thing that we have here are these claps. And both of these are sampled as well. So again, like, you're really going to want to take a lot of different samples from different records. Because it's all about that texture, right? Like, these just have so much texture and character to them. And life. That you just don't get the same way using, like, say, Vengeance samples or something like that. And this one's just going through a little bit of reverb. And then on the group, I actually have a pretty good amount of compression. You can see, it's probably more than you would usually do. I've got the release down quite a bit. So without it, it still hits about the same. It's a little bit punchier with the compression. Obviously, though, the compression just kind of flans it out a little bit. When I was referencing this, I was noticing like that dry clap without it being just super compressed. It just doesn't really stand up. It doesn't have that like very just big kind of like bombastic feel. So that's where this comes in. It just makes the clap sound huge. And it's definitely one of those things where like if it sounds good, it is good. Then we have these bongos. So you can hear, it's just a bunch of different ones. I actually have 5 of them. So it's kind of like 2 different grooves. It's these 3. And then, it's these 3. And these 4. So there's that groove, but then there's also this one. So we have like kind of a more open, like a little bit of space between it with these, and then this one's just constantly going. And that's the idea here, right? We have the contrast of those 2 different grooves. Now, they have to each be like a really solid groove on their own. Like you have to be able to play this with the rest of the drums. Right, and like that's already just really good. And then same deal with this groove. So then you put it all together. And it's gonna work really well. But the other interesting thing here is maybe like this could be your intro. And then you just like start bringing these in. And like you can kind of build up your arrangement just using these layers, you know, once you go to arrange this. And then on the group of those, it's just a bit of drum bus and some reverb. So the drum bus here, you know, I haven't been using this as much. As you know, it used to be my secret weapon. But with this, it works really well. You know, the reason why we wouldn't want to use this maybe is to, you know, if we don't want things to be too crunchy, I think it can kind of mess that up. But here, you know, the crunch is fine. So we're just going for it. And yeah, then I have the hi-hats. So obviously, these are very lively sounding hi-hats. It's all just sampled hi-hats from different records and different drum breaks as well. But what's happening here is there are a few different tricks to kind of make it feel really lively. Because I think if you just take like a hi-hat off of a record and just drop it in a sampler and go, it's not really going to have that kind of nuance to it. And there's a few different ways to get that. The first thing I'll say, obviously, is like, if you play it in live, you're going to get a very lively feel. But I didn't play this thing live, but I've done a few things here to make it work. So the first thing here is just this. So this one, what it is, it's actually just one hi-hat. It's this one. I'll show you the original sample. So it's that. And what I did is I just took that and I made it a little bit quieter, and then it goes louder. So it's like. So that's an easy way to give that a more like live kind of feel, but obviously it's still very housey because it's very like steady. And it's also just being high pass a little. And then we have this one. So what this is it's 4 different hi-hats here. I'm pretty sure I used the first 3, and then that 4th one is the same one that I used for the other hi-hat. But essentially what's happening here is you can see I made this little pattern. So it's pretty steady. It's just every time. But what's changing is obviously the velocities and then the different hi-hats. And when you use like a few different hi-hats like this, you get kind of like little different things, because you'll notice like the waveforms are obviously very different. Like this one's a little bit quieter. You know, this one's a little bit thicker. This one is different. So you get that little nuance there between the different layers. And you can even do more too. I mean, like if you want to do like 5 or 6 or 7, like you can really go crazy with this and make it feel like it's just a live hi-hat. Like the idea here is just to make this feel like it's being played in live. And another thing here is I have this add some random. So this is actually just one of, if you go under Ableton's MIDI effects, velocity, they have this add some random. And it just does a little bit of like random velocities. So if I turn that off, you can hear it's a little bit more rigid. Like it doesn't feel as live. And then we just add that. And it's adding that little thing. And obviously, you're never hearing the exact same velocity twice, which really helps as well. And then on the group of hi-hats, I have this low-pass filter, which might not seem like it's doing much. Here's without it, though. And then with it. So ironically, it's actually adding a little bit of a high-end boost. But what it's doing is we're just chopping off the like highest high frequencies. Like just like right up there. You can hear it. It just gives you like a little bit more of a lo-fi sort of effect. Even though it is boosting the highs actually, it kind of just makes it a little bit deeper and a little bit more like lo-fi. It's a really subtle trick, but you can actually do more of this if you want. Like, you can go there. You can even go there if you're feeling like lo-fi house, but yeah, so we just got that. And then on the group of these drums, we just have a bit of compression as well. So, yeah, the drums are going to be pretty compressed. You can see we turned up the attack on this one. I'll try to turn it up even more. And if I turn that off, you can hear the drums, again, they just don't have that, like, sort of character and that animation to them, you know? So, yeah, it's not, like, the craziest compression, but really makes things sound big. And then you just have to know how to use it. Again, like turning up the attack so that it doesn't mess up the transients of any of the sounds. Then we have the kick. This is just a kick that I made with some layering. Now the way that I made this kick is I took a few different ones. Like I took some more housey kicks that were really just like this one low layer from like a housey kick, like a more like boom, like thumpy, like something kind of like this, like these ones that I have. Right, where that's going to have that like really full body to it. But then layering that with kicks sampled from different drum breaks. So like you could use like, you know, there's a ton of different drum breaks out there. But essentially like layering those for the top layer and getting the click and the punch from those and also the texture and the different like noise and stuff. But still having that like fullness of like a modern kick. Because the thing is, if you just take the drum break kicks, like I'll show you what I mean. Like I have some different breaks in here. See, like, they don't have that big of kicks. But you can get a lot of good character out of that. So then you just take this for the low end. Like, just, again, like, whatever your favorite kicks are. And yeah, and then there's not really much processing on that. You can use a bit of saturation or drum bus if you want. I kind of already layered them to just be, like, solid like that. But, yeah, and then we have this electric bass here. So I want to say this is just like an electric bass sound from Ableton. You can see, yeah, I'm just using this one. It's this palm mute one, so it's a little bit more like you get like space between the notes. It's not just like long held out. And then I've got it going through a little bit of this bass amp, and then it's being sidechained to the kick. But really, these types of basses are not as much about the sound, and that's why I'm not putting so much emphasis on that in this video. I think you really need to pay attention to like writing in the right notes, because this bass is only going to be as good as the notes that it's playing. Like, you can have the coolest bass sound ever, but if you have kind of a weak bass line and you don't know how to make your bass line like really groove with the drums, it's not going to be worth anything. So yeah, just like a live bass sound, but pretty much after that, for the actual notes, you can see the thing here is that it's really just following a G minor scale. That's the key we're in, is G minor, right? Like, we're literally just walking up it, like root note, 9th, 3rd, 4th, 5th, minor 7th, and then another root note again. Just like this very bluesy kind of disco style bass line. But yeah, the thing that really makes it are the notes here. And like the fact that you have this really steady like and then having like, for example, dun, 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 like knowing where to do the long held out notes. And also knowing how to not do too much as well. Like, I think a lot of times when you're writing a bass line like this, it can be tempting to do like a whole like you know, and you can't do too much like that because that can get a little bit messy. You need to keep it to the root note. And then also just making sure you have this progression in the second half where like first half kind of down here in the scale, and then the second half you venture out to there, so it has that call and response of the first part and then that second part. And yeah, then we have the sample. So yeah, this is the style of sample that you would usually use in the style of track, you know, something from like the mid-70s, like lots of soul and funk and stuff from that area. And what you want to try to go for is you want to either, you know, if you have records or if you have a record store near you, look for some records, or if you have YouTube available in front of you, just go there. But what you can do is you can kind of dig around, you know, obviously like YouTube and record stores as well are going to recommend you like kind of a lot of basic stuff, right? Like a lot of like stuff that's either been sampled a lot or is just known and would be hard to sample without getting cleared. So what you can do is once you get to those videos or to those records, try to like dig around, like find who the producer was, or like find who like the drummer was, and then like see what other records they were on. And that's where you find like a lot of really good stuff this way. And I think that's really like the art here is like digging and being able to find a sample that hasn't been used that much or hasn't been used at all, ideally, and then, you know, making it work with all this other stuff, like making it work with like this live bass line. Which we'll talk about that a little bit, but that's really where this all comes down to, you know, because obviously anybody can take a sample, but like to really work with a sample and make it sound good takes skill for sure. And so yeah, we've got this one here. I'll play you the original sample. You might recognize it. Pretty dope. You know, I'm trying to find something with like a lot of character to it. It's got a lot of strings and just different stuff going on, so it's very interesting. And it's not going to be too bland, and it's going to add a lot of character to your track. And then the key here is the way we're chopping it. You notice I'm kind of like breaking the rhythm of the original track, because like that should be the one, but what I've done here is I did like, it's kind of telling a different story with the sample, essentially. Like, you don't want to, obviously you could just take this loop, it's a pretty good loop, but it's like taking that and doing something different with it, and like seeing what you can do, because all these are essentially just major and minor chords, right? Like, and they're already in the same keys, so whatever order you put them in, they're gonna sound cool. And if you want to pitch them up, or if you want to like maybe take one, like I said, figure out which one is a major chord, which one is a minor chord. You can even make your own progression with it, with pitching, and you can do a lot this way, especially with Ableton, obviously. So just kind of like seeing what you can do with the sample rather than just using the loop as it is on the record, right? And another thing here is like the art of making this just really groove with this bass, which I talked about a little bit. But the key here is obviously having a really good bass line, and notice how there's kind of like a little bit of space there. Like we get do 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 do, and then when we have the held out note, that's when there's no sample. So that kind of like it makes that sample hit a little bit harder, right? But then also what's happening with the sample is we're chopping it in a very simple way. Like, it's an interesting progression, and I've kind of rearranged it, but really like it's all just quarter notes. It's not like any crazy like with the MPC like do 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 like doing all the stuff or like whatever. It's just like very simple, because this needs to kind of just be like really steady. And then the bass line can just go crazy. If you do too much with the sample and you do like do 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 do, you know, like a bunch of eighth notes and like playing in a bunch and like not having those little spaces in there, but just having it play the whole time. Like if I did like something like that. Like that might be cool for a little fill, but you can see like you just don't get that groove with the bass line. So you just have to know, like, to get this out of the way of the bass line and kind of design your pattern in a way where it's just going to sound cool, as simple as it is, right? Where you're not going to be like, oh, this would sound so much cooler if I just did 16th notes. Like, make something that just sounds good without that. And then for processing, it's just a bit of saturation, high pass filter, a compressor side chaining into the kick. And then the last layer down here is this little vocal chop. So yeah, another classic. I think this is from like the mid-70s, maybe the 80s as well. Early 80s stuff is pretty good for this style of house as well. And then over here I chopped it. So I just took that one, pitched it up a little bit. Kind of the thing I was talking about with the sample there. But yeah, so this is cool, you know, it's interesting to take like a vocal either from the track that you use for like your main sample, or like in the case of this isn't from that same track. So like maybe bringing like two tracks together here and just getting it in key. And that's just going through a bit of echo, and what I've done is when it ends, you see the echo goes, so it kind of picks up, because if we don't have that, you don't really hear the echo that much. And you can hear also the echo is dotted eighth notes, and that's even grooving with the sample and the bass line. Where it's like, no, 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 bro, and then the sample hits. So it's all working together to make the groove work here. And yeah, so if you follow all the steps, you should be able to make a track in this style. It's actually not that hard, but it's all about like just making it very lively and just finding really dope samples, you know, being able to write the good bass line and then getting some good drums as well. And yeah, so that's gonna be it for this one, guys. I hope you enjoyed. As always, make sure to like this video as well as subscribe. And let me know what you think of this video as well in the comments. As usual, you can get the full project file, samples, MIDI presets, everything you saw in this video is available right at the top of the description. And if you're a patron on my Patreon, check there because it's already available. Thank you so much to everybody who goes and clicks and buys the samples. It's just $5, but it really helps support me. And yeah, thank you so much, guys, and I'll see you tomorrow with another video.